What I like is community driven content, I like the community element around the games where people are bringing their creative things out into the, public sphere through zines or itch or whatever. I like that idea of like what I called at some point in time open gaming, where the gaming community themselves puts out the content for the gaming community, where it's gamers making for other gamers, people who are passionate about it more so than like making a game for the profit of a shareholder.
Hi, welcome to the Dieku podcast. I'm Gary Snow, and with me is Logar the Barbarian from Wobblies and Wizards podcast, the daily podcast, which is like an amazing feat unto itself. As a podcaster, I can't even believe that you're able to do it, but it's absolutely tremendous. I love listening to it. Logar, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be on here. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Have you been the guest on other podcasts?
Only a few, only a handful. I think the first one that was on was RPG Ramblings, and I like him. He's a solid feller. Jeffrey there that does that. He's a good guy.
Cool. Well, we're going to put you in the hot seat on this episode, and we're going to ask you questions about your podcast and your own journey into the game design world. And as always, we've got to start off with, how did you get involved with the role-playing games in the first place?
It was the late 80s, and I was obsessed with Doctor Who on PBS. I was a nerdy child. And I would go mow lawns for like $3 a pop for my little pocket money back then. And I needed anything and everything that was Doctor Who. And we found one of the first comic stores I had ever seen in the 80s. I lived in Cleveland, Ohio. We made our way. My dad took me up there to this comic store to get whatever I wanted, because I was always really into comics and Doctor Who. And there was the Doctor Who role-playing game. I didn't quite know what it was, but I had to have it. And that's what I got with my pocket money, was the Doctor Who role-playing game. And we didn't quite understand it. So we used to take our little action figures, lots of superpowers figures back in the 80s, lots of superpowers figures, Star Wars figures. And so what we did was we tried to roll up character sheets for our figures that we had changed into other characters. Mine originally was Secret Agent Shane, because my name is Shane, but his name changed and became cooler over the years. So we just rolled up character sheets for all these characters, and we would fight them because we didn't know you had to have a dungeon master or anything. And a buddy of mine who was really into Robotech came over and said, "Hey, we're doing this wrong," and started running some like Heroes and other Palladium games for us, like Turtles and stuff. And that's kind of how we got into role playing.
That's cool. And I mean, me and you have talked before about we have similar paths as far as I love Palladium too. But and similar to you, when I first played Redbox, I'm sure we were not playing it right, but it was that imagination that you're just like letting it play out. And honestly, that's probably my favorite time I ever played. And is it the same for you, where you think about, even though you didn't know the rules, Doctor Who was fun?
I don't know. I've really enjoyed it over the years. We had a lot of fun when we were kids. We were excited about it. One of the cool things, we didn't have, the first dice was a hard thing, but we had this math cabinet at school that had different numbered dice or different numbered shaped dice. So we started stealing those things. We were bad little hooligans. But I do remember, like, my friend, his dad was a wrestler, like, I guess you could say pro wrestler, but that didn't mean he had money or nothing. He was like a local carpenter who wrestled on the weekends. But they had a wrestling ring in the backyard, and we'd take our little guys and our little character sheets and everything out to the wrestling ring. And that was the coolest thing, because it was a massive base for us. We built up things, and it was like a huge imagine having your own gigantic wrestling ring size terrain for your figures. So yeah, we had a lot of fun there. It was enjoyable. It was different, but it was how we started.
Well, you just reminded me, I have an interview with Adam Vass, and he's from World Champ Games, and we talked about wrestling being basically role playing and a LARP, like, and there's a large crossover of people that like wrestling and role-playing games, and I think there's a part of that suspension of disbelief of the fantasy world of it, so it's kind of fun.
My knowledge of wrestling is very low. It's very, but largely most of my knowledge of wrestling came out of like this period in like the late 80s and early 90s there from interacting with them and getting what I got. And then a few friends who I role played with, a few of them got into wrestling. So going to see those local shows and stuff, that's pretty much where my knowledge ends.
That's the best part of wrestling is the local shows and like the territory era of wrestling. But anyways, I don't follow it anymore, but when I was a kid, I mean, I love that old stuff. And in Calgary, we had Stampede Wrestling, which is the local territory with Bret Hart and the Hart family and all that. But yeah, it was super cool. So sorry, I got us off track there. Palladium, you kept playing, and where else did life take you during that time?
Oh my goodness. So that was my early days of playing. I eventually got into D&D and there was a period of time in the 90s when role playing was a daily thing for me. I would go and the role playing shops would have like people would post up the little things with their numbers. You'd yank a number. And I'd get into every bizarre little game that way. Earth Dawn. I attempted at a Shadowrun campaign that never really went too far, joining in there. But I played so many. 90s, it was every game you could find, anything and everywhere. And I probably played that way. 2000, when 3rd edition hit, I did one campaign of 3rd edition. And I did that for about a year. I don't think it was a full year. We played it at Denny's. It was a cool campaign because Denny's had a back room that was like a private room. And after we played it in the booth for a week or two, they started bringing us into the back room. We get a private room. And the woman who used to come and wait on, she was, of course, a young woman then, the same age as us. She would come and she would usually be our waitress. Still hang out with her to this day. Good friend of mine.
Get a grand slam and roll a 20. It's
I don't have it here. The one day I don't have it. I usually sip from a Denny's mug that was looted from that Denny's the night they were closing. Was like the night we wrapped up the campaign. They were closing down and tearing down the Denny's. So we finished up the campaign that night and looted a bunch of mugs for memory's sake.
That sounds like a good idea for a short film, just saying.
We had fun. And I got a couple mugs sitting around the house to this day to remember that campaign. After that, shortly after that, I graduated in the mid 90s and spent a few years off and about enjoying the Marine Corps kind of late in life because I was just kind of doing some kind of just punk rock thing, getting in a lot of trouble, and whatnot. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do something to get 3 hots in a cot. And then stuff got really crazy, as people know, at the beginning of the century there. And my life got turned upside down, as they say. And I don't think I was able to get a steady game going until about 10 years ago. There was a period there where I would try to play. Like I tried to play a few times in the barracks with the Coasties. The Coast Guard guys shared barracks with us when we were at Fort Meade, Maryland. That never went too far. There was a group that played in 29 Palms, California. Like I said before, it was like once or twice, never congealed to a full campaign. I would try to get campaigns started with buddies. We'd be like, okay, we rolled up Heroes for Heroes Unlimited or Rifts or some. And at that point, I was like, AD&D mostly and Palladium because I wasn't buying that many new books and I was just using my old books when I was trying to play. So when I did finally get a current game going a little over a decade or so ago, it was AD&D stuff that we were playing for a long time. So we just stuck with those books. It was expensive to go out and upgrade and everything else. So, and I still play to this day.
And so at what point did you go, hey, I'm going to start a podcast and share my love of gaming?
So I'm going to preface this with what I did before. I was a blogger for a long time. And my blog was not a game blog originally. I had a political blog that got attention. And I killed that thing not quite 10 years ago, but it's been dead for a while. We destroyed it, annihilated, nuked it. It's history. It's gone. You might be able to find it on the Wayback Machine. And And so putting out content and stuff like that regularly was something I'm like, accustomed to. And I've been worked in when in the Marine Corps, I was a 4611. I was a combat illustrator. I did design, illustration, marketing, cross trained in videography and stuff like that. We're with TVIC, who did the military channels. So my whole career had, for a long period of time in the Marine Corps and after the Marine Corps, for about 12 or more years there, was very much marketing, print production type, advertising type stuff. So there was all that there in my background at a point. So I translated that to doing a blog, and we started to do a little blog that wasn't pushed very regularly a few years ago. We bought up tabletop-roleplaying.com and just put occasional posts that no one paid much attention to. And it was just me and some folks from my game group. And someone had suggested that we use the Wi-Fi password as the name of our podcast and or blog, because a few people had banter around. I'd like to do a game podcast, probably get more attention than the blog, because the blog world has died. It's gone. It's very niche, and it doesn't get the kind of traffic it would have gotten 15 years ago when it was in full swing. That kind of traffic tends to be more on podcasts. So someone said, use the Wi-Fi password, which my wonderful spouse is the one who came up with it. Wobblies and Wizards, as your title is catchy. People will remember it. I said, yeah, you got a good point. So I bought wobbliesandwizards.com and migrated the blog over there. And I just started, I said, I don't know if I was never a big podcast person. I was kind of ignorant about them. There were two podcasts that I listened to regularly. And neither are game podcasts. One is Behind the Bastards, and the other is Philosophize This, just a philosophy podcast. I'm big into philosophy and stuff like that. So I approached this, and I didn't really have any framework to work off of. I was just like, I'm just going to post a little 10, 15-minute thing every day until I can figure out how to do this. So that's like, if you scroll back to the earliest remaining episodes that are out there, that's kind of what's happening. I'm trying to figure out how to make a podcast and posting this stuff. Now, mind you, I have some experience with editing audio and video, mostly from the Marine Corps and other places that I've worked at in the past. I hadn't touched any kind of software like that in years. And less so the audio, most sort of the video side is where my experience was. So I started looking up what I would need. I was like, okay, what should I look at for like having, because the audio was kind of crappy. I was recording with this not so good mic on a headset, and I started trying to improve it and learn how to edit, because the earlier episodes were not edited. So I started doing things like looking at YouTube tutorials on Audacity and stuff like that. And then I started looking for ways to bring someone else to talk to me in on it. And I think a lot of the earlier episodes is random people just like, hey, let's try to figure out how to work a podcast. Let's talk about game stuff on here. And then what we started to do, people ask, oh, how do you do it? It's a daily podcast. It's a lot. If you listen to a lot of podcasts, they're talking about an hour or two worth of content, like weekly or something like that, right? That's what we were cranking out. Essentially, maybe less. You're talking about 15-minute episodes. We're going for 10 to 15 was our goal. It's just me and a couple folks from the game group would do this on Sunday morning and just sequentially just do 15-minute episodes and go from there. And then I could just edit it after we record it. So time-wise, it might be more on the editing, but I don't think it's too much more than most podcasts are. They're just doing it in one episode, whereas the idea that I kind of had was said, 15 minutes. I was kind of looking for something that was like, I want to listen to a game thing on the way to work real quick. And you only got like 15 minutes to work within that period of driving to work. So that's kind of how the whole thing started, I guess. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Or is it rambling?
So now I'm gonna do a deep dive. We might lose some people that are into the game design stuff, but I find it fascinating. So let's go there. The behind the scenes stuff, like when you record your episodes, do you do like in big batches, like back to back to back, or do you spread them out, or is it all over the place?
So it's very there's a lot of answers to that. When we started with just me and Light and John and fellow worker Nick and a few others that were on at the beginning, that was just once on Sunday morning we'd do it. Occasionally you'd pick something, I don't know, and I would record a lot of them solo on my own, especially for zine reviews, because one of the early things is like, I'm going to do a zine every Thursday, talk about a zine, read it. So the zine review I'd sometimes do on my own, but most of the time we were just recording those that morning on Sunday morning. Well, then when I started reaching out to other guests and having more people on, it started changing. So I'll block out like an hour's worth of time to record a 15 to 30-minute episode normally. And that adds a little bit more to the time that it takes to put together the podcast. So the more guests I have on, the more time, the more times that vary, and I have to do the scheduling and all that and figure out, where I can fit this in my schedule. Luckily, I do have a fairly flexible schedule. So, and I don't know if that answers the question or not.
And I guess the other thing when did you kind of have that moment of like people are like either coming to you to be guests, or like you hit that critical mass where like it just all kind of gelled together where you went, I've got something here?
I don't know if I'm not 100% sure I can answer that completely. I think it's been progressively, because we've only been doing, like, we're just now coming up on our 1-year anniversary. I've only had this podcast for a year. I think last February was the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to try, because so many people were coming to me with Zine Month stuff and reaching out to me. I started reaching out to a few others and said, okay, I'm going to try to fill this month every day with someone who's doing something for Zine Month. That's the point where I said, wow, this takes a lot of time and energy. That was the point where I said it takes a lot of time and energy, and probably the point where I was seeing the most amount of people reaching out to me, just kind of like to try to get on. It's definitely, I get a lot of people contacting me these days, and it's hard to keep up with everyone. What I do, like, I like to talk to people like we've had Stephen Chenault on, Matt Finch, Chris Gonnerman, who are people that I looked up to because I had a lot of their games and I've known about them for a while, and you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I got to this point where I was reaching out to people that I thought were, oh, these are the cool, they made these cool things. And then I was discovering things along the way as well from all the people I was talking to, exposing me to new things and whatnot. We try to, like, I have an ethic that's very much like driven by my politics. Like I said, I used to do a political blog, whereas like I like to see like the DIY, the not big sellers, the not big brands, the people who are putting stuff out on their own, being creative on their own. And I like to try to push those kinds of things, those kinds of creators and games on our site. So certain days are kind of reserved for, okay, this is just going to be some DIY creator who's put stuff out on itch and trying to get people to look at what they're doing. And definitely a lot of folks that are putting stuff out have been reaching out a lot. Some other folks have begun to reach out too as well. So I don't know when that dam broke where people started reaching out to me as much. I'm definitely still trying to reach out to folks though at the same time. There's a couple guests that I really want to get on, and I'm trying to get them on, and we'll see. I'm hoping it happens. They said they'd come on. We'll make it happen.
Are you allowed to say, or are you going to jinx yourself by saying?
I'm not going to jinx myself. We'll see how that goes.
And there's a couple, and even for me, there's a couple guests, and I won't say who, but I've, tried to get on, and just scheduling or just timing that hasn't worked. And and I'd like to get them on at one point, but it's, sometimes difficult, and I mean, I do video, you do audio primarily. And so like some people are like, I do not want to do video, at least that's what they've told me. So as far as one question I was going to ask you about, once again, kind of behind the scenes stuff, you have a Patreon. And when did you start that up? Was that right away, or did it happen?
No, we started that sometime this year, towards the beginning. I want to say maybe around February-ish we started it. It hasn't been up too awful long, it doesn't seem, but maybe it's been up longer than I realized. So yeah, we started the Patreon later on this, and I'm still trying to figure out 100% like the kind of stuff that's there right now is like we'll have some exclusive stuff. So there's even more. If you like listening to the show, there's even more content. I'm gonna be honest. We tend to get off of game a little more into weirder territories and the exclusive stuff sometimes. They're a little more candid. You're not going to get the music and the intro and everything that you also don't get the advertisement at the beginning either on the Patreon. So, and there's other tiers as well. Sorry.
It makes me wonder, like you always start off your podcast with pitching for Anchor. How did that happen? Are you sponsored by
That's just what Anchor has. No, yeah, this is what Anchor has. Anchor, like when you go join Anchor, they give you they say, oh, we'll get you things. And they got this thing. It's just, every click is a few more cents, I guess, or almost a cent.
Well, it all adds up, right? And yeah. I'll digress maybe a little bit for like, I had a Patreon and for my background, and people can go back into my videos and see when like I did a game design and I was thinking about doing a monthly Patreon. And so I kind of put that aside. And then I had one subscriber come in late when I had transitioned to doing more podcast stuff, like video stuff, interviewing people. And I was like, well, I'm not really making games right now, but I think that's why they signed up, was for the games. And I felt like a lot of pressure. I was like giving them like free, like early access to video interviews, but I was like, I don't like the pressure of Patreon. I was just like, I hope they unsubscribe soon because I just didn't want to do it.
There is not a lot that we're going to promise you in the Patreon. You're going to get early access. As soon as I get an episode edited and uploaded and ready to go out there, it'll be on the Patreon. So you get early access. We also put extra content on there, like audio wise. There's other things that have gone up, like a little dungeon crawl and some other things. It's hard for me to get enough time doing all this to focus on some of that stuff, like the individual dungeon crawl stuff and stuff like that. I 100% would love to spend more time on that, but I have to do other things to bring some cash in. So the more Patreons I get, if I end up making $1,000 a month on there, I'll spend most of my time cranking stuff out for there, and that'll be it. But I don't see that happening this week. So yeah.
And with all the guests that you've had over the year now, and like with so many different aspects on how they approached game design, and like I tend to do like the long form, like an hour deep dive kind of thing. But have you learned lessons from anybody along the way? I'm sure you have, but are there any that stick out that you're like, wow, like that really impacted me?
I've learned a lot, and I don't even know where to say what would be like the one that impacted me or anything like that. I've definitely been exposed to whole new worlds of gaming and whole new like areas and stuff like that from talking to people. I'm leaning into this rules light stuff these days, but I'm also, like we said, I come from Palladium and AD&D, and I do like a bit of a crunch. I do like the old school D&D. It's kind of like the thing I'm passionate about. And then this new school of stuff comes around, like the NSR, they call it, and stuff like that comes around. And it seems like all the hacks that people have been putting out there are great things for me to steal from for my game. I get to check out their games and play them out and try out and see how those things work. But I also get to import stuff into what I'm doing and tear it up and have my fun. I'd say the biggest lessons have been I've been working on this game for a while now. I don't know when I'll say that I'm going to try to put something out. It'll probably come out on a Patreon. And we've been working on a game that's I don't know if I should try to describe it. Let's do it. I've been kind of, I have this apprehension to like say too much out loud, because then I've said too much and people expect this much by this time. It's like, I don't know where we're at in putting this out.
So under promise and over deliver.
Yeah. I want to under promise. I don't want to over promise when you hear about what we've been working on. But it's gone this gamut where it's like at the beginning, I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to make this game. I'm going to use the Year Zero engine as the perfect game. And then I stopped and I said, I don't feel like using the Year Zero engine's perfect for this. Maybe if we made it as a mothership module, we went forward doing that. So we started putting it together as a module for mothership. And then I realized mothership, as much as I tried to fit it in the mothership, it didn't fit. So we started looking at things like like Cairn and Knave and Into the Odd, and said, well, we just do a really simple system like this. And as we were doing it, I realized maybe there's a better approach. And we went back to the drawing board and started reading through all these like Cepheus Light and I got the old Traveler 77 box up there and pulling out the old classic Traveler stuff and started looking at stuff like that. I said, well, maybe there's something here, and like taking some of this old Traveler-esque stuff and applying some of these principles of like Into the Odd to this, and there were still things we were taking from Mothership and other places simultaneously. So it's kind of becoming its own beast. It's not as streamlined as like a Cairn would be, but a lot of that, just the process of going through that, and me and our game group messing with that, I think a lot of that was we've been doing is stuff we've been learning from people we've been talking to.
Yeah.
So that you.
Well, it sounds like me and you are on a similar path, because I think, obviously we're both hosting, but at the end of the day, like I really like have always wanted to design games. That's been, my forever dream. And so with that said, I've gone through the whole gambit of I'm going to design my own system. Well, I didn't have the knowledge that maybe I do now. So then I went, okay, what about Savage Worlds? What about Year Zero engine? And like you start
love
chasing
that Year Zero engine.
it's good, but then you start chasing your tail and you go, well, that doesn't fit with that, and how could I accommodate that? Well, maybe I should do this, and then maybe I should go back to doing my own original system, because that way you have control of it, you can make it what you want it to be, and you can really end up like not procrastinating, that's not the right word, but trying to find that perfect fit. And sometimes I've heard a lot of advice, so one of the advice that probably comes up an awful lot is just do it, just get it out there, start the ball rolling. At least that's some of the designers that just, why not just get it out there and let the world see what you're offering and go from there.
Yeah, I think that hopefully I got a few other things I got to finish up in the next couple of weeks, and I'm hoping that I have time to really sit down. And it's like a lot of the stuff that I do a lot of the layout too and stuff like that for things that I mess with, and a lot of the art as an illustrator and stuff. So there's a lot of different aspects to trying to get it out. Like, and I got to do this because I'm not putting something out there without the design that I want it to have. And some of that's done. Like I have been messing around with my oil paints a little bit and making a few pieces to go with it. I may try to do some more other things. We'll see where I go, but it's just, it is what it is. It's not the biggest, greatest thing. I don't want to put another game system out there. And that's the thing. I'm very much like, I just want to get stuff that's compatible with what I'm running. And when I'm tackling this, I started to see that there wasn't a thing that did what we're trying to do or what we wanted to do. Did I see a need for another game system? Maybe. I don't know how much of a need it is, but it fits what we're trying to do better. And what we're trying to do is a little, like, one of the things is we're trying to veer far away from combat in our game, make it a very combat unfriendly game. So, and some of the choices we're making on the design leans into, you don't want to engage in combat type stuff. So,
and is that the end goal for you? Do you think you want to be like a game designer, or are you?
Oh no, I don't know if I would say that's the end goal. I don't know if I'd say that's the end goal. I'm not 100% sure where the end goal is with the podcast, right? It would be, if I could, I think at the end goal in general for my life trajectory is trying to get my hands in a few different things here and there that's manageable enough to like not have to sell my labor to somebody else to get by at the end of the day. Being able to have a little more choice in my life and schedule. And that's what I've been attempting to do for a while, if that makes sense. But
so as far as like the game design industry goes, what are you seeing as far as trends that you like, trends that you'd like to see continue, and what do you see as the future for 5e or a 6e? And it seems like a lot of people are really gravitating towards OSR. And what's your perspective on all of it?
I can't speak to a 5e or 6e. I haven't picked up a new edition in a long time. Now that's not 100% true. I did get 5th edition books with some Walmart gift cards I got for Christmas a couple of years back. So I picked those up, but I don't actually even have them in my possession. I gave them to some kids who were trying to play. So I don't know much about the 5th edition world or 6th edition. What I like is community driven content, I like the community element around the games where people are bringing their creative things out into the, public sphere through zines or itch or whatever. I like that idea of like what I called some point in time open gaming, where the gaming community themselves puts out the content for the gaming community, where it's gamers making for other gamers, people who are passionate about it more so than like making a game for the profit of a shareholder. So that's what I like. And I see that booming in a lot of ways in today's gaming industry with the change of technology, with the zine scene and stuff like that, where I see people being able to have a lot more control over what they put out and be able to put out without having to have a publisher. Like, back in the 80s, how are you going to pump out a game book? You don't have drive through or anything like that. You need a press, you need a publisher, you need someone to take it up, you need some company to give you the okay to put it out. That's the trend I see that I like in the industry.
Cool. Well, Logar, I want to thank you for joining me here today, and I'll put all the links to your website and your podcast, and everybody should subscribe, check it out. Daily podcast. I love listening to it. You have some amazing guests, and you always bring a neat perspective to things. So, I think it's just a really great podcast. So thank you for doing everything you're doing for the community.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's good to be on here. I like it. This is cool. Thank you very much.